Alright, so now that we have an understanding of how to read the code just a little bit, like you start at the entry point, in this case here, and then if you have a function, you jump to that function, you read it, and then you come back. Once you have an understanding of that flow of how to actually read the code, we can now start talking about variables, which I like to call fields because it's easier to pronounce since I'm not an English speaker. So let's talk about those fields a little bit. Now in programming, you want to be storing information inside of fields. Storing information inside of variables such as how many lives do I have left in my games. So let's just say you're playing Super Mario Bros. And you die once, you have to keep track of how many lives you had before, then reduce that by 1 since you just died. Now for our very first script, we are only going to be looking at 4 different types of fields, which are fields you're going to be seeing in all the programming language, at least type-safe programming language. And you'll know more what I'm talking about in a moment. Now when declaring a field in C#, you have to actually just declare it inside of a scope. A scope is pretty much everything that is inside of brackets, so if you want to declare a field for your whole component, you do it inside of here because that is your whole component here in between those two brackets. If you want to do it only for the update function or only for the start function, you do it inside of those brackets or those brackets. Let's actually have a look at how to actually declare one of those. So the first thing you do is you write the type of that field and then a name, and then you can stop here or you can assign it a value. And let's actually have a look at a real example here. Let's start by declaring our very first type we're going to be looking at, which is a int, which stands for integer. Let's have a name such as life count, and then we can stop here and keep track of our lives, or we can assign it manually by saying 3. Okay, so now let's have a look at the very first thing we wrote. We wrote int, which stands for integer, and then we give it a name, that's fine, and then assign a value. Now the value that you assign to your field has to match the type of the field you have. In this case, we have a int, which stands for integer. In a integer, you can write all the following kind of values. So say -10, -5, 0, 1, 3, and all those whole number can actually be assigned to int. So here are some examples of what we could have typed in here. Now let's look at our second type. Our second type is called a float. And for this one, let's call it speed. This one is going to be equal to 2.5. As you probably already noticed, this one can take in decimal value. So in the float, you can store negative decimal value, you can store a positive one as well. Now something that you also probably notice is that every time I write a float, I also add a little f here, which stands for float. So you need to do that when you declare a float in your game. Okay, so we have the integer, we have the float, the floating point number. Let's have a look at the next one, bool, which stands for boolean. And we can type something like is running is equal to true. This one is very fun because it's so easy to learn. It can only contain 2 values, and those 2 values are either true or false, written like this. So it has to have a minimize letter at the very beginning. And a boolean can only have the value true or false, nothing else, and it's usually used for a condition, which we are going to see a little bit later on. So this one is quite simple, we're going to leave it there. And the last one is a little bit more complicated, and this one is called a string. Now, as far as the name of that field goes, we can write something like my name, and type in, say, Michael here, why not? Good times. Now, this one is mostly used for storing text, as you can tell. You can write text just like hello world, which we did earlier when we did our debug.log, we actually sent in a string. Now the way that you tell your code that you're actually writing a string right now is by putting the double quotes. As you can tell, I've got my name right here, but on the extremities you have the double quote. Make sure it's double quote. Now this is not just like HTML or PHP, you have to use the double quote. Using the single quote here are going to result in you having a char, which is another type for a single character. But we're not going to get into it right now. Let's just have a look at other values you could have. So you can have hello world, you could have Dave, and you can have all those strings as long as you write the little quotes at the beginning and at the end. Now that brings me to earlier, a little bit earlier, we wrote something like debug.log, and the message we were sending is something in between quotes. So I don't know if you remember, guys, we said something like hello snake or something really similar. This right here, what we typed inside of the parentheses, is actually a string. Now let's have a look at what happens if we take this string up here we declare, and we just take the field name and write it in here without the quotes. We're actually using the field that we declared. We're actually using the variable that we declare. Let's have a look now what happens if we press on play. It says Michael. It doesn't say hello Michael, it's only saying Michael because, let's have a look here. So we start on line 15, we do a debug.log, so we're going to be writing something in the console. What it is going to write is what is inside of the parentheses. Now, right now in our parentheses, we have a field name, we have a variable. If we just have a look at the variable, we just click on it once, as you can tell it highlights up here. And just like we said earlier, our code might actually send us to a chapter somewhere else in our book. We have to go to that chapter, grab the value, and then come back. Let's have a look here. So my name points towards this field here. This field is equal to Michael, and then we just put Michael inside of here. So as you can tell, we simply replace our hello world by a field name. So guys, that is where I'm going to end today's lesson. In the next one, we're going to be using our fields just to do a little bit of mathematics stuff and just have a better understanding of how our code works with those fields. And thanks a lot for watching. Please leave a like on the video if it does help you, in any kind of way. Or check out the Patreon page if you wish to support this course or the next course I'm going to do in the future. So thanks a lot for watching again. Please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.